All right, today we are building this desk from start to finish. This is a shortened down overview video, so if you see something you want to know more about, please check the playlist for more details. I have done a whole series on this desk. I think there's like 7 or 8 different videos. If you've been following along this whole time, thank you very much. Otherwise, enjoy and let's get started building the desk. Now the desk on the guest side has a live edge, but on the business side, it is squared off. All right, so the first thing I need to do is decide which one of the live edges I like best. So this one's pretty straight. That one's pretty straight and boring. But this guy right here, I like how it's wider on this side and then it kind of swoops and curves back out on that side. So I think this side is going to be the side that I keep the live edge. The desk length is going to be 66 inches. So I'll cut her off right here. All right, so I don't want this sapwood to end up in my desk, so I'm just going to line this up here. I'm sighting down to see what direction the grain is. Since this is a nice tight grain on this side and this is a nice tight grain on this side, I want to make sure my grain isn't going diagonal if one of these pieces is crooked. I want to make sure the grain looks like it's one piece of wood. I think that looks pretty good. All right, so I'm going to put a couple of pencil marks and line my track up to the pencil marks. All right, so how this works is we've shimmed the slab so it won't move around, so it'll stay in this position throughout the entire operation. These front and back rails are cut to the same exact height, and the workbench is a torsion box, so it's nice and flat. So when we move our sled along, it will create a perfectly flat surface relative to the top of this guy and the top of the workbench. All right, we'll flip it over here and do the other side. All right, so the router sled leaves these lines here. So I got a little bit of work to clean that up. I have a solution for that. All right, we got it nice and smooth and flat, so now we just need to work on this seam and joint it together so it fits nice and tight. All right, so we have this live edge here, and I don't want to damage this edge because this is the decorative edge, the whole reason why the client wants this type of top. So I don't want to damage it by putting hard clamping pressure down there, denting it or scratching it or whatever. So I'm only going to use this one clamp just to kind of help pull them together gently, and then to clamp the seam, I'm going to use these glue blocks, use CA glue to glue them down to the surface, and then pull clamping pressure towards each other with these glue blocks. All right, so I took the clamps off, now that it's dry, and it's just time to pop these guys off. All right, the slab top for our desk is almost done. There is one thing left I want to do, and that is inlay these bow ties along this little crack here, little decorative inlay. And then we'll sand it up, squirt some finish on it, and move on to the rest of the desk. Now, if you want to see an in-depth video on how I inlay these with nothing but a mallet and chisel, no router at all, I will put a link somewhere to that video. I'm going to start by veneering up these panels, so I need to create some shop sawn veneers. All right, so my final thickness that I want for my veneer is going to be 1/8 of an inch to give me the thickness I want my panel to be at. And when setting up the feather board, I want to make sure that I'm not past the blade, because if it's past the blade as the material passes through there, It can be push the material into the blade, pinching it, causing it harder to push the cut through, or causing the cut to get off track, stall the blade, or I guess worst case that I slip through and hurt myself. All right, so make sure these two meet up nice and tight. I'm gonna pull off a little piece here, and this has a little sponge and water bottle in it to wet the tape as I go. I'm gonna put it on one side and then pull it together tight. I'm gonna stitch together and basically just pinch it with my fingers. If I can't pinch the seam tight with my fingers, I did a bad job jointing the edges. All right, there's several ways you can get this veneer tape off there. I used to wet it down and it scrapes right off, but spent all this time making sure we got this panel nice and flat. I don't want to add any undue moisture, which could cause any kind of cupping issues. And I've invested in a drum sander, so I'm going to send it through the drum sander, and a couple of passes through there should clean that right off, and any kind of other little glue goobers that may have accidentally ended up on there during the veneer process. Now we're moving on to the joinery and all the basic structure of the desk. I've got my cut list here, and I'm just going to start going through and cutting all my parts a little bit oversized. All right, so I got all my parts rough cut and organized here. So whenever I do a large project like this and I rough cut my parts, I like to stack them up in the section assemblies that I'm going to build them in. And then I put my shop drawing with each one, so that way there's no confusion. So this is the inner panels, this is the outer panels, this is the web frames for the drawers, and then this guy is the front panel, rails for the front panel. So that way I have my drawing for quick reference and nothing gets messed up. Now we just got to mill them up to their final thickness and final dimensions, and then start cutting joinery. All right, these are my leg blanks. I've intentionally cut them a few inches too long, and so now I've squared up one end, and then I set up a stop on my miter gauge so that way I can cut them all to the exact same length is what I'm doing here. And by using a stop at the miter gauge to make sure everything gets cut to the same length, just makes the project come out more accurate, more square, easier to cut all the joinery in the exact same spot. So yeah, I utilize my stop all the time. All right, I'm gonna always measure from the top down. That way, if there's any discrepancy in the length of the leg that I cut, it won't throw off my panel width. And then this is the dado. So 1 inch deep and a 1/4 inch deep. All right, pinch it between some dogs to hold it. All right, I cut my mortises first in all the legs, and then I reset the depth stop to cut the dados for all the panels. All right, let's cut some tenons. I have my dado blade set up in its widest setting, and the tenon's a little longer than what my blade can do, so I'm going to take 2 passes, One, take half of it and then bump it up there. Flip it over and do the other side. All right, since round tenons are done, let's square these up real quick. All right, let's finish cutting these shoulders. I like to do this last little bit by hand. So I'm going to use my little strip pieces to do a test cut to test the fit to make sure it fits good. And then I will cut my panels. And then when I cut my panels, I'm going to cut my panels so it's good face up, and that way any kind of inconsistency in the dado will be towards the back of the desk or on the inside of the desk facing the drawers. So whenever I cut my tenons, I always try to err on the snug side of things so that way I can remove wood. It's way easier to remove wood than to put it back, and this little shoulder plane cleans everything up nicely. And then as I go, I'm going to mark them AA, BB, CC, so that way they all go back the exact same way that I test fitted them as. All right, so I got the main structure of the desk done, and next we are going to put a copper medallion here and then a copper and walnut grid, and that copper and walnut grid will go all the way around the desk to this other side. It'll go across the drawer fronts as well, so I think it's going to be a really cool detail. All right, so the grid is only about 3/8 of an inch thick or so, so instead of wasting all this walnut, I am going to slice off a strip of veneer and then use that for a future project. And then once I get down to my final thickness, I'm going to rip them into little strips to create the grid. All right, so I'm cutting my slats for the grid work, and each time I'm going to make sure I use my stops so they come out all exactly the same, and that will help ensure that the grid work goes together nice and square with no issues, hopefully. All right, and then as I cut them, I'm just going to lay them out in order that they go, just so I don't get confused. All right, so I got my dado blade set up, and I'm going to do a couple of test cuts just to see how it fits together. All right, so it took a couple of tries, but here we go. All right, last two pieces. All right, that's just wide enough to catch the metal on both sides and leave me some meat in the middle. Our depth of cut is still good. All right, so because we used a router bit, we got some roundy corners here, so I'm just going to use a chisel and clean those up. I'm being real gentle because this material is real thin, so I don't want to accidentally split it by hammering down too tight or too hard. So I'm just going to take my time, put some music on the earbuds, and just take my time and get it done. All right, so I'm working on cutting the copper to fit in the grid, and since the copper is so thin, when you run it through the table saw, it kind of chatters and bounces around, and I don't feel super safe with that. So I have it taped to a piece of hardboard. I have 1 inch squared up that I ripped off camera to give me a square edge, and then that square edge will go up against my fence to help me generate a square edge. And I'm going to cut it face down like this, so that way it doesn't chatter, and the cut is a little bit more safe. All right, here we are at my favorite part, adding the patina to the copper. So each piece is sprayed with a chemical solution to add the patina, and then is hand stippled. And I just keep working that until I get a pattern that I like, and then we're going to put it in the fume chamber to bring out some additional colors. All right, and then we're going to seal it up here and let it sit for a couple hours. Yo, Mr. White. All right, so it is time now to conquer the segmented rings. Let's get started on that. All right, if you want to know how I went about designing this ring in SketchUp, I will put a link to that video somewhere. All right, so this inner circle is the actual size it's going to be. I'm giving myself a 1/4 inch allowance so I can cut it round after I cut all the segments. And then we'll do the same thing on the inner circle, what its actual size is, and a 1/4 inch allowance. All right, so we're going to use cherry as the accent strip between each board, or between each segment, and then we're going to use walnut for the main body of it. All right, so we're going to set up a wedgie jig, I think a lot of people call it. All right, so this ramp is to help kick the little parts off as we go. And then this guy is going to set our distance. All right, we're all set up. Got my stop. How it works is these guys should be parallel to each other. So make a cut over here and then make a cut over here. And then just keep going back and forth, making that wedge. And this is ripped parallel. So any kind of inconsistency by going back and forth like this should cancel each other out. And I should end up with a really close to, if not dead on, 15-degree wedge. All right, so I tape this end of the tape down and it's sticky side facing up. All right, and then I'm going to clamp a straight edge down right on the edge of that tape. All right, do I have them all? Let's see, I should have been counting better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Last two. All right, so I got them all stuck down to the tape, ready just to curl up and tape together. So do I do a test curl to make sure it all works? Or should I just put glue in there and hope for the best? I think I'm going to put glue in there and hope for the best. All right, so we've officially made a mess. Everything looks nice and tight all the way around. Since I can't fit this on my lathe, I'm gonna double stick tape this down. All right, we did a small round over on the edge just to dress it up and ease over the edge. And now I'm setting up to cut a dado in the back of this for the copper to recess into. All right, so next we need to install our decorative crossbars here. All right, so I milled up some scrap wood, the same thickness as my circle here. Make sure my first rail is nice and flush. All right, so how this is going to work, my first spacer will go down and we'll screw these down, route it out, pull this guy out, put my second spacer down, which will move us to the second position, route it out, and then move to the third spacer, put a piece down, route it out, and then that way we'll have it spaced out just how we need it. All right, there's for the first stick right there. All right, so this is going to be a half lap into this. So I already got the dados cut in there. All right, so now I'm just going to use my marking knife and mark exactly where it intersects here. Since this is a curved surface, I'm going to have to do a lot of this by hand. All right, so here's the game plan. Here's my knife marks that I've transferred from the circle. And I'm setting them in pretty deep with my knife. All right, and then I have my router plane set to the depth that I need to go as well, or a stop on it. I'm going to take it into little pieces. And as I get down to the final couple passes, I'm going to definitely be going in from both sides to make sure I don't accidentally tear out a big chunk. All right, one down, 4 more to go. Trying to fit the last 2 pieces in and disaster struck. Okay, so before I throw 2.5 days of work away on this little segmented dealy whacker here, I'm going to see if I can save it. Luckily, it's split along most of these seams, and these seams land underneath the half lap. So I'm pretty sure I could just glue it over there, and I'll pin it, and we should be good to go. I think we're going to make it happen. So I'm going to get some epoxy and see if we can get her done here. All right, from here we're going to pre-finish some parts and then get the copper installed. All right, and then so I don't get glue on the areas that I pre-finished, we're going to tape that off. All right, the adhesive I'm using is a 3M neoprene contact adhesive. It's designed to stick metal to wood or metal to metal and not react with the metal. So it's some pretty strong stuff. The neoprene adhesive is incredibly strong, but I did just throw a couple of headless pins in a few strategic places just for a little extra insurance. All right, so it is time to start building the drawer boxes, and my final thickness of drawer box is going to be 1/2 inch thick. And right now I'm starting out with 4/4 material, and instead of sending this through the planer and planing off half this material, turning half of it into sawdust, I'm going to peel off a couple of layers as shop sawn veneers. And what I'm going to do with those shop sawn veneers is veneer this birch plywood, and that will be my drawer bottoms. So by shop sawing a couple of strips of veneer off of each one of the boards that I'm going to use to build the drawer box out of, will guarantee that it's all came from the same board, so it's all the same color. All right, so I finished resawing the drawer sides and got those guys milled down. And then the pieces of veneer that I resawed off the drawer sides to save material, I have got prepped and ready to veneer to our panels. This just saves a nice bit of material, and then also the color and grain match the sides of the drawer. All right, I'm getting ready to build the face frame for the drawer fronts. I've already milled and ripped to width the material here. So next I just need to cut it to length. And so I'm going to set up a stop at the table saw to cut these guys to length. All right, so I have all my parts cut to length. Now I need to cut a groove in here for this panel to slide into. Normally I would do that on the table saw, but on the top rail, I don't want that groove to show. So if we look at this drawer we made in a previous video, you can see where the tongue and groove comes into play there. Now I don't want that to show because on the top of these drawers we're going to have an integrated drawer pull, something similar to this, and I don't think it's going to look very good with that showing. So we're going to cut them out on the router table so I can make a stopped dado there and not have the groove come all the way through. All right, so I have a 1/4 inch router bit set up here, set up to the depth I need, and I have it set up so it'll cut down the center of this board. And then I have stop and start points right here, so that way when I'm cutting I can still make room for the groove, but this won't show through on our handle detail. To make sure the groove was centered, I ran it through, flipped it around, and then ran it through again, and that just guarantees that my groove is centered. All right, right now I'm cutting the tongues to fit the grooves for the rails and stiles of our drawer fronts. Then I'm going to switch over to cutting a rabbet for the drawer front so it'll slide into that groove. All right, so we got our tongues on here and we got a nice tight fit. So it fits pretty well. All right, it's time to make the drawer handle. This is my prototype piece. The original piece is going to be made out of walnut, and this took several steps to make. So I did a practice run just to make sure I could build the concept, and now we're going to do the real thing. So let me show you what I got set up to create this handle. All right, so first step, I have a large nose bit, and I'm going to take several passes to get to my depth, and that is what's going to create the underside for the fingers to grab into. All right, so I want my cove to go right up to this line. So I set my square up here, so that way I can measure from the bottom up to raise my bit up to its final height. All right, so I'm going to change my bull nose bit out for a thumbnail bit. All right, so now I need to cut this swoop here on both sides, and I want both sides to be exactly the same, and I want each handle to be exactly the same. So I devised this little jig here, and basically it has a follower curve that follows this main curve. And if you look at this handle, it starts out really shallow and then gets steeper as it goes, so that curve changes as it goes. So when I created this jig, I had to create that offset that has that same shape of the curve, just bigger. But basically you clamp it in here, and that follower block follows you along all the way out to the other side. And then you flip it over and cut the other side. All right, so the router left a point here, and I don't really have a good way to get rid of that point with the router, so I'm just gonna pinch it between two dogs here. And then I'm going to use my block plane just to plane that off in kind of a rounded fashion, similar to what I did with this guy. All right, I got my drawers all sanded up and my handles all sanded up. So I'm gonna slide this guy in there. Nice tight fit. I think that's pretty good. So, and by the way, this handle style I borrowed from the Wood Whisperer on his, he did something similar on his executive desk. So I liked it, so I'm borrowing it. All right, so this guy's dry enough to take the clamps out, but the seam is still a little bit tacky. So I'm just going to clean up any kind of glue squeeze out while it's still a little tacky. Peel my tape. All right, so we're just a little bit proud after I glued this on here. So I'm just going to take a hand plane and flatten this off, and then I'll sand it in and blend it in once I'm done. All right, and just like I did on the front and sides of the desk, I'm continuing that copper grid pattern around onto the bottom drawers, and I'm using the exact same technique to create the grid and glue the copper on. All right, so I also made some accessories. This ladder we milled in earlier will hold this little shuttle. And that guy can index wherever it needs to be depending on how full your cabinet drawer is, your file drawer is. And that will prevent your files from going all the way to the back if you only have, you know, a little bit. And then you can just move it back as your files grow. So that's that guy. And then I built a pencil tray to keep all your pencils, pens, and other accessories, paper clips, and stuff like that. All right, thanks for watching.